let's talk about social work. It's this hugely important profession that's happening all around us in pretty much every part of Indian society. But, it's also a profession that's widely misunderstood. So today, we're going to peel back the layers and take a look at what it really means to be a social worker in India. Seriously, just take a second. What's the very first image that pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's a very specific and maybe kind of limited idea. Well, the reality is way broader, way more complex, and frankly, a lot more fascinating than you might think. So, in a hospital? Yeah, absolutely. You'll find them right there on the front lines, working at that really tough intersection where sickness meets poverty, and helping families get through some of the absolute worst moments of their lives. How about in a factory or on a construction site? You bet, they are absolutely there too, supporting India's massive workforce. We're talking over 500 million people, and fighting for their safety and their rights. Okay, now this one might surprise you. A policy think tank? Yep, even here. See, social workers aren't just on the ground. They're also working behind the scenes, helping to shape the very laws and policies that affect all of us. All right, let's really get into it. So let's start at the most personal level. This is where social workers step in during moments of individual and family crisis. And this is where you can often see the immediate, powerful impact of their work. Just look at this list. The range is incredible. A hospital social worker is doing so much more than just paperwork. They're handling what are called psychosocial needs. Basically, all the emotional, social, and financial stress that just skyrockets when you get sick. They get that a disease isn't just a biological thing. They tackle issues like helping a family get financial aid or making sure a TB patient can actually stick to their treatment by dealing with things like stigma or lost wages. They're really that human link in what can be a very cold, complex system. And well, this brings us to a pretty stark reality. The need is just immense. This quote right here really drives home the incredible pressure these folks are under. Imagine, in some places, one single person is responsible for the well-being of hundreds of patients. And a lot of government hospitals don't have a social worker at all, which leaves doctors and nurses trying to handle crises they just weren't trained for. Okay, now let's switch gears to one of the most emotionally challenging fields you can imagine, child protection. When a distressed call comes into Childline, that's 1098, it's often a social worker who has to respond, stepping right into these really difficult situations of abuse or neglect to work with the authorities and make sure a child is safe. Okay, so we've seen how they work with individuals. Let's zoom the camera out a bit now and see how that work expands to empower entire communities. This is where things get really interesting, because it becomes about a long-term collective vision. And the key thing to get here is that this isn't about some outsider coming in and saying, here's how to fix your problems. No, the whole process is collaborative. Social workers act more like guides, helping a village figure out its own needs, form its own groups like a farmers collective or a women's committee, and then build the skills inside that group to lead their own change. And you know what? This quote just illustrates the power of that approach perfectly. Think about it. Landmark organizations like SEWA, the Self-Employed Women's Association, they didn't just pop up overnight. They're the result of decades of patient, persistent work, building that power from the inside out. And this kind of community work is also absolutely crucial in the fight for gender equity. I mean, social workers are pretty much the backbone of things like the government's one-stop centers for survivors of violence. They run shelter homes, and they get women's self-help groups off the ground, which gives women both economic power and social confidence. All right, let's pull that lens back even further. We've gone from the individual to the community. Now let's look at the macro level and how they actually work to change the system from within. Wow. I mean, this slide tells you everything you need to know with just 2 simple bars. The mental health gap in India is, well, it's staggering. We're talking about roughly 1 psychiatrist for every 100,000 people. It's a gap that, let's be honest, doctors alone could never, ever fill. So, who steps into that massive gap? You guessed it, social workers. They're the ones on the ground, in the communities, providing that essential care, running de-addiction programs, and helping people with severe mental illness get back into their families and their communities. They are a huge part of the solution. Just take a look at this number for a second. 100 million. That's the estimated number of internal migrant workers in India. These are some of the most vulnerable people in our society, often with the fewest protections, and it's the labor social workers who are out there supporting them and fighting for their rights.
And their influence on the system doesn't even stop there. You'll find them in leadership roles at major NGOs, working with huge organizations like UNICEF to push for better policies, evaluating government programs to see if they're actually working, and even working inside government itself.
Okay, so let's recap. We've seen social workers at a hospital bedside, in a remote village, and inside a government office. On the surface, these jobs look incredibly different, right? So what's the one common thread, the one core idea that ties all of this together? It all comes down to this one crucial point. It's a tiny shift in one word, but it changes absolutely everything. They don't work for communities, they work with them. See, this isn't about charity coming from the top down. It's all about partnership. It's about empowerment. It's about building up a community's own strength to make change happen for itself. That's the secret sauce. And that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. In our world today, which is so focused on tech, on finance, on things we can easily measure, how do we even begin to calculate the value of a profession that's all about building resilience, fostering empowerment, and strengthening human connection? It's really something to think about.